All right. Hey, I've got my good friend, longtime friend, Andrea Middleton, to come on. And I said, hey, Andrea, she is so experienced in some of these areas we're going to talk about in a second. I said, I just want to just ask some questions of you. And I'm going to let her talk more about her specific role of what she does. But we've known each other we're trying to go back, like scale back. She started her position in 2011. So I know at least in that time period, we've known each other and worked together in various capacities with her role and my past as a participant in the industry and the conferences she puts on. But she has an incredibly complex job. And I told her this last week. I said, you're in like in the middle of gunfire. Sometimes I think you're in like a hole and you pick your head up a little bit. That's kind of the way I vision it, but it's not really that. The way you lead, the role you do with community leadership, with all of these, they're called WordCamps, happening across the globe. There's one or two happening every weekend, I know, because I used to have the calendar updates on my phone. 1,000 WordCamps plus, and WordCamps are little conferences for WordPress geeks. WordPress is software that powers a third of the internet or so. And this awesome lady is the person that wrangles all these volunteers from, 65 plus countries, 75 cities, 6 continents. WordCamps are all over the globe. So I thought, who better to talk about community leadership than my friend Andrea? So thanks, Andrea, for taking some time and coming and talking with me.
Well, thank you so much for the invitation. And I'm very uncomfortable with how important you made my job sound. But it's a real honor and a pleasure to have work with this much complexity and constant new interesting dilemmas and kind of ideas because I really thrive on learning and variety. And I will say the WordPress ecosystem and community has been kind enough to give me pretty much uninterrupted opportunities to grow over the past 8 years or so. So that's great.
See, you even characterize it so well. Um, but I was thinking as you're saying that, I was like, there's never a dull day for you in what you do in the work.
I mean, we have a huge, and I should be clear, like it used to be just me
Hmm.
back in the day, but
I
these
remember.
days, as the WordPress open source projects community programs continue to grow, I'm lucky enough to work with a huge number of people who contribute to our programs, both our monthly meetup program as well as our WordCamp program. And the WordCamps are the annual conferences organized by the community leaders that organize our meetups. And we have some people who are paid full time to work on the programs, and we have a huge group of really dedicated volunteers who give us as much time as they have available, more time sometimes than I can believe. And so these days, I'm certainly not alone, and I think our programs are stronger and more more impactful than ever. So I'm really
Absolutely.
excited about that.
Well, I do remember those days when it was kind of you scrambling and trying to take over. So, there was so many things going on at that time, and then over time, you have helped with your team. You're so
Mm.
gracious to give credit to your team, organize and make them for the benefit of the organizers, the conferences, and the participants. And
Mhm.
I've seen it happen. I've been to at least, I think, 45 of these conferences over 11 years, 12-year
Goodness.
period of
Mhm.
time, and they have gotten better. And it's such an interesting conversation around all of this because, like we've kind of said, volunteers from different cultures. We were talking
Yeah.
about before we started the recording, and how culture affects, what kind of drink you serve, for instance. So I'm gonna. Oh, before I dive right in with the
Mhm.
questions, so what is your official title? Um,
My title at the company that pays me, which is Automatic, which is the company behind WordPress.com and WooCommerce and a bunch of other great products, and they pay me full time to specifically work on the open source project that is WordPress and WordPress.org. My title at that company is .organizer because I organize at .org. We're whimsical in the technology sphere. But yeah, that's my title.
Okay, so I want to pull something up for a second. You are a loaned executive, more or less, from a for-profit company to run all this. And by the way, I wanted to say that was some inspiration for our own nonprofit. So we paid our executive director as a loaned executive to work in our nonprofit, similar to how Automatic does that so graciously. Okay. So thank you for that. And I did see that you were the .organizer and wonder where that came from, but now you've explained it. And that makes sense within geekdom at Automatic.
Yeah, Matt came up with that title himself and was quite pleased with it. So yeah, I've held on to it for a while.
That's awesome. Okay, so within all this, there's things to get impact. But first and foremost, how did you get started in this role?
You know, this role came to me quite out of the blue. I was recruited by a friend and a colleague that I had known for, well, gosh, since we were both in our 20s and canvassing for Greenpeace together in Portland back in the 90s. And she, at the time, she went by the name Jane Wells. She changed her name to Jen Milo. And that's the name she uses now. And at the time, back in 2011, she was, I think, project managing core, overseeing the design of WordPress core, and then also creating the community programs that we have today, creating the seeds of them. And she needed somebody to do one of those 3 full-time jobs. And she reached out to me. And my background previous to this kind of phase of my life and working in technology included a number of different professional areas. I had been a high school and junior high school teacher. I had been a salesperson for a beverage distributorship. I had been a marketing and HR professional in the construction industry. So I had a wide range, and of course my activism way back in the day. So I had a wide range of experience, and she recruited me and trained me quite intensely for about the first year. I was a WordPress user and I loved WordPress, but I didn't know a lot of the stuff that makes our community so interesting and idiosyncratic. And so I have a lot of, I still think back to all of the stuff that I learned over that first year in 2011 and have a lot of empathy for the people who are just coming into WordPress and learning where people are sensitive and where people just kind of assume everyone knows the same stuff and all that stuff. I was hired to basically implement the program that she had created. And I did that on my own for about a year. And the program was a way to kind of give some more infrastructural and kind of ideological support for people who are organizing these conferences, WordCamps, that are WordPress-based conferences that are organized, staffed, and managed exclusively by volunteers all over the world. So it's a lot of working with volunteers. It's a lot of international considerations, and it's a lot of, if you've ever been involved in organizing a conference, there are some mission critical things that you really have to pay attention to and get done at a certain time. And so supporting people in that in a volunteer role has been really fun.
I know I keep saying this, but it's such a unique, essentially as people listening just heard that and what you were saying, it's volunteer led. Tickets are around $40, $30. And typically participants get lunch, an incredible lunch, coffee, or whatever caffeine beverage you said of their choice, and access to a wealth of talent and experience as speakers, and then the Genius Bar or Happiness Bar.
Yeah, some kind of technical support,
Technical support.
volunteers there too. Yeah, and I mean, what's really kind of mind blowing to me about WordCamps and to a lot of other people, is that all of our speakers are volunteers, and of course, all the staff is volunteers, and all the organizers are volunteers, and it's this really, really inspiring, I think, a kind of model for what people who come together with a common goal can accomplish. And it's interesting, you were asking me a little bit about earlier when we were chit-chatting, about my work with the community, because when I took this job, what I really thought it was is, and the way it was kind of explained to me, it was like, Andrea, you're here to keep the organizers organized, right?
Mhm.
Like to, and to make their jobs easier, and to shield them from risk, and to make sure that the attendees that they're serving are well served, to help them, prioritize what, where money should be spent and all this stuff. Um, and that's what I really took on as my mission, was like keep everyone organized. And my understanding of my role has evolved a lot. And then
Mhm.
my understanding of what our volunteers role has evolved a lot. And it's been, I was thinking about it this morning, it's kind of happened in parallel,
Mhm.
in a really interesting way, because a couple years into the job, I realized I'm not actually here to organize people, because we have, because it's volunteers, people kind of move in and out of the program with a lot of
Mhm.
regularity. And so if you're strategic, you have to plan for
Yep.
attrition, right?
Yes.
You have to.
Yeah.
Otherwise you're left in the lurch. And with WordCamps and any enterprise, volunteer organized and run enterprise that has a financial component, like, it really is dangerous if you just, throw $20,000 at something and just cross your
Yes.
fingers, right? So, so that resilience and engagement has been, a real, something that we really have been working on for a long time. And I had this epiphany about like 2 or 3 years in. I'm hard-headed, so if you tell me to do a job, I will just keep doing that job until I figure it
Uh-huh.
out.
Yep.
About, I'm not actually here organizing organizers, I'm training organizers. Because we have developers and designers and sysadmins and all sorts of people. Like, you don't have to have a lot of experience to organize our events. You
Mhm.
have to have a passion.
Yep.
As Josefa likes to say, we don't call the qualified, we qualified the called.
Ah,
And so
good.
we bring people in who have the passion and want to achieve the mission and the goal of bringing WordPress enthusiasts together to make connections and inspire them to do more with WordPress. And then we train them how to do that.
Yep.
And so I was like, oh, I get it now. I'm a trainer. And the program shifted a little
Yeah.
bit for me. And like the mission I was setting with our kind of meta volunteers, people who are like helping do the admin work and supporting all of our volunteers that way, that shifted. And then, Cory, and this totally ties into your work, I realized again, about 2 years down the road, I we're not training event organizers, we're training leaders.
Yeah.
Because the
Definitely.
work of creating a community, and our events are not just a single unit. Like, the events are an ends to a means to an end,
Mhm.
where we use the kind of team building exercise of creating a meetup or a WordCamp as a way to bring the community together. So the mission of our organizers isn't to create the best event possible. And I knew this from way back, but it hadn't clicked for me until later. The mission of those organizers is to use the event to create a space and to create a shared mission for their local community. And so what these people, so our volunteers come to us with frequently with very little leadership experience or with leadership philosophies that vary widely. And they come into our space, and what we're training them to do is lead in a very specific way that's strongly influenced by open source.
Yeah. Well, okay, so this is so interesting, and I'm going to get off a little bit, but yes, the fact is, it just hit in my head that I would suggest any young person that's interested in leadership, go volunteer for an event like this, because you do have leadership is so interesting. You know, we can't, as managers, CEOs, directors, whatever our title is, we can't force anybody to do anything. We have to lead them.
Yeah.
And what's so interesting, the parallel to my background, the closest thing I have to something like this would be church work. I was about 6 years in church ministry work, servers on staff, and you worked with primarily volunteers. Well, I always knew there was buckets of time and energy that people had.
Absolutely.
They had to be passionate too. They had to care about the work. And I couldn't go in and be a jerk. I couldn't go in and tell them to do something. I had to inspire and move and try to share, walk with them to do things. And I think, just any young person looking to do leadership at some point should go and volunteer for something like this, because it is a melting pot. Like, it is the perfect laboratory to learn proper, I would say proper leadership skills.
I would also say proper leadership skills, because the thing about working with volunteers is positional authority is practically non-existent. Like, anyone on your team can walk at any time and may do so inadvertently, right? So they may end up walking because of a family tragedy or a life transition or something else like that. Or they may just not have interest anymore, right? And so, and I feel like anyone can rely on positional authority to try to accomplish goals from a leadership position. But as you and probably a lot of the people that you work with know, positional authority is the weakest tool in your toolbox.
Totally.
And so learning how to motivate and how to inspire volunteers to work on a project that isn't for them, it's for other people.
They're not getting paid to do. They're spending their own time and probably even money, gas and stuff to get there.
Oh yeah. There's that component too, and so that is the best leadership training that I can think of, because it teaches you the most important parts. If you have that part, once you get the positional authority, you won't even need it. Like, it's not even important. Well, and there's so many different levels in there, right? Like, you can lead a little group. And that's the other thing that I think is particularly exciting about the leadership training that we're providing through community programs is in open source has this kind of philosophy of leadership that doesn't rely on a title, that strongly benefits the great idea, and also the level of commitment you have to the group. And training people to focus more on what benefits the group than what benefits themselves is another really important component to fantastic leadership.
Yeah, what an amazing, I did not even know we were going to kind of get here, but this is the magic. This is the special stuff, and why I wanted to talk to you. You're absolutely right. I think too often we get promoted into a position where it's like, okay, here's the title. And then, the way I've seen it, and I'll admit to being here too, is when you get the title, you feel like it's a bat.
Right.
That you can, bully people, honestly. I mean, deep down, it is that. But when you're coming up from something like this is why I said my experiences in church work before I started the company iThemes so invaluable, because I had to learn that everybody is a volunteer.
Yeah. Yes. Anyone can leave your organization at any time. and again, inadvertently, right? So like that resilience training of, like, sometimes the most pivotal person on your team for this launch might get sick or something like that. But some of the stupidest mistakes I made in my first year doing this work were relying on some kind of positional authority, which is such a culture no in the culture of open source. So
yeah. Well, and I think that's the transition within business and leadership in general is, it's not command and control. We're all volunteers and we better work together.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, you've got me segued on this and I love it, but I want to ask you some other questions.
Yeah, sure.
The other thing that is, well, I forgot my thought. But anyway, we could spend the rest of the time talking about this, and we're going to have to come back.
I have one more thing before we move on.
Yeah.
So then, because Cory, I've had another in the last year, like probably I could do a talk on like the 3 epiphanies of my job so far. My most recent kind of, I won't say epiphany, but like when it really settles, like when you know about something and then all of a sudden it settles into your brain, that thing is the other thing we're training our leaders to do, our community leaders to do, is to train new leaders. And that is like, I've really struggled with learning that, and how to see my success and as a reflection of the work that the people that I'm working with can accomplish, right? And then also, I mean, it's just I haven't quite figured out a way to package that for our community of like, not only do you need to work on growing yourself as a leader, but at the very beginning of that process, you should also be training the next generation of leaders throughout your tenure in a role here. And that is tough because frequently we still have the problem with our volunteers that they don't realize that their position is a leadership position. Yeah. We have so many people in open source and in, but even in the community program specifically, who don't realize that their position is a leadership position. And so, and the problem with that, for one thing, is your vision is too short, right? Mm-hmm. You're focused just on the task and not on the mission. Yeah. But then also the problem is your touch is too heavy. If you don't realize how powerful your words are, if you just think that no one's listening to you, and if anyone's going to listen to you, you gotta like make a fuss, or that even if someone does listen to you, they won't do anything about it. The quality of your dialogue with the world and with your community really is different. Right? But if you're aware of your power, if you accept the idea that like, hey, I'm going to say something and it's going to make people think, so I'm going to really think about how I say it. Like that's one of those kind of second year of leadership kind of lessons that I'm really trying to figure out how to get into the first year of training.
Oh yeah, exactly. And that's got to be so tough. But again, another great takeaway for leadership in the business world or any other facet of life where we're leading other human beings is that we need to be training that next generation, that if we're not multiplying our own leadership in a good and healthy way, we're doing a disservice to the people that follow behind us. And I think that's so core. And so, particularly with WordCamps, I think it's like 2 years. You can be the lead organizer for 2 years, you rotate off. When I first heard that, I'll be honest with you, I was like, but all that institutional knowledge of that person goes away. But there is such the benefit that you're saying is you're also training new leaders as they pull in and step up. And I've seen that throughout the United States in particular is more of the WordCamps I've been to, where 1 year was this person, 3 years later I come back and it's a whole new regime. And the feel of the camp is so different because that new leader or leaders have infused their own kind of DNA and values into
And there are some misconceptions in there. Like some people think like you can be the one lead organizer because we do. I mean, we do have one positional authority position because the central organization needs one point of contact, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lead organizer, and you can do that role for 2 years in a row without until you switch out. But that lead organizer can still stay on the team,
Yeah.
and then can come back again in subsequent years. But then also we have a mentorship program that once you've done your 2 consecutive years as lead organizer, you can grow into a different kind of leadership position within the central organization where you are mentoring other new organizers coming in, and helping grow them through basically coaching, and mentorship, as you know, and then your influence and your leadership can really spread around your region or even around the world, depending on when you have time to talk to people.
Yeah.
So yeah, we were really worried about that, like losing the institutional knowledge, and also just, you know, you grow leaders and you're like, bye, see you later. But keeping them in to kind of help multiply that guidance and that support,
Mm-hmm.
has been good.
We kind of backed into some of the answers to this question, but I want to ask it specifically is,
Mm-hmm.
so I think about all this and I go, it's herding cats. So, you know, if how do you keep cats in one little group? And when you talk about volunteers with, by the way, everybody has an opinion,
Oh
but in
yeah.
WordPress specifically, people have just take that up a couple notches. And I'll say that for myself too.
Me too.
But it presents this interesting leadership dilemma. So, what are some keys you've seen is from your job specifically to others in the organization and the different camps and things about leading people?
Mm-hmm.
And then we have this nuance too. It's not just America,
Yeah.
not even the northern hemisphere. It's the entire world now. It
Mm-hmm.
reaches across crazy. Just looking at all
All
the
those continents. Yeah.
so what are some thoughts? What comes to mind when you think about herding cats, aka leading volunteers and participants all over the world?
Well, we did touch on the fact that, in my opinion, it's the same as any. Well, the way I do it is the way I would do any leadership. Let's put it that way.
Yep.
Because in my ethical framework, that it is simply the most ethical way to lead people. But it is. So primarily, the first thing I want to do is give people an idea of what they could accomplish as part of the whatever organization that they're joining, right? And try to be as clear as possible about what we're going to ask and then what they're going to get in
Mm-hmm.
response. And there is a huge misconception, not necessarily in the nonprofit sector, I think, but where like technology and nonprofits intersect sometimes, that volunteer work is unpaid and unacknowledged. But there are ways that volunteers get something back from their experience. I recently wrote an article for our team blog about this on make.wordpress.org/community, about the 4 gets of community organizing, and laying those out as the context of like, here's what we're going to ask for you, and here's what you have the potential of benefiting from personally, is a great way to get started. And those gets, I sometimes forget one of them. One is impact, right? So like
Mm-hmm.
you're doing this work and it has a benefit that affects people that you care about, right? The second is training, is growth.
Mm-hmm.
You get the chance to gain skills in an environment that will not affect necessarily your day-to-day job, right? So you can, like, if you've always wanted to be a project manager and there's no way to do that in your job, come on over to us because we've got project management roles, and you can start learning those in a sphere that doesn't mean that your boss is going to get mad at you or something like
Mm-hmm.
that, right? So that's happening over here. And it's progressive, right? So you can join, you can get small bites and then bigger bites and then bigger bites as it goes. Then certainly support. So being able to, not being out in the desert by yourself, but having a network of people with experience that can help you identify ways to get past challenging situations or share other solutions. It's that connection component, right? And then finally, in our program at least, there is a safety aspect. No volunteer in our organization has to spend their own money on buying the badges, or if they do, they're reimbursed, and they don't. We shield our volunteers from tax liability and insurance liability and stuff like that through our kind of infrastructure. So laying those things out of here's how this transaction is going to go, of you benefiting us with your opinions and your work, and us benefiting you with this growth and impact. And then, certainly creating a lot of psychological safety for people never hurts. But most of all, showing people how they can both benefit others and themselves at the same time generally makes the program pretty sticky for people, right? There are very few people who are successful in our programs that are not interested in the benefit for other people. We're not great for people who are mostly motivated by personal benefit. We're highly altruistic. But yeah, that's in a nutshell. That's my.
Yeah, you kind of got to understand that when you give without the get, you do actually get a lot.
Yeah.
But you can't have the get as your first primary. And I some of my dearest friends are WordCamp organizers, multiple years. I've met some of my dearest friends at WordCamps. I have never been an organizer. I've told you this years and years. Probably every year that we've known each other, I never want to be an organizer. I want to go support organizers, help, whatever that is. But it's such a tough role to be an organizer, because you're given so much of your own self. But the best ones I've seen feel like they're hosts, that they are behind the scenes. And I see their smiles when they just see things happening, and no good things are going to happen in the space that we call WordCamps. So I think that's so special. Okay. So, one nuance too is that we're talking about a community with the WordPress community, which is pretty much virtual. You don't see each other every day face to face, perhaps. But this venue, something I think I even read in your bio before this, was that it is providing, well, you just said this earlier, a space to meet face to face, which is really, really special. It's a lot of people that are spread out that probably don't even know who each other are, coming in a space to meet face to face, and the value of that. So what have you seen with that? What is that special value of being able to?
Well, not to toot my program's horn in an annoying way, but I really feel strongly that the amount of focus that we have in WordPress on in-person gatherings sets our project apart in an amazingly integral way from other open source projects out there in the world. The emphasis and the amount of kind of infrastructural support we've given community events is unheard of throughout the open source world. We provide so much more support in WordPress than any other group does. And I think it really shows. We are a group of passionate people who care a lot about sharing our opinions, and all of us like being right. So that's throughout open source, right? You don't come to open source if you are cool with just complying with somebody else's ideas. You come to it because you have a thing that you want to get done, and then you maybe stay for more things. So open source communities tend to be fairly high conflict. And WordPress is no different there. But the level of grace and dignity that we have in our conflicts compared to other communities is unusually, I think, unusually high. And I lay that completely at the feet of our in-person events program, because you get people together in the same space, and the quality of their interaction changes, and that carries over into the online sphere. And our events welcome people, our funnels into WordPress contribution. And so,
totally.
And so the behavioral expectations that we set at our in-person events, that's how humans work, right? You come into a group, you check it out, you're like, okay, how do people talk here? How do people interact? What's okay, what's not okay? And human brains change based on what the expectations of the group are. And so when we set that expectation for highly inclusive events, swearing is very unusual in our space, for respectful communication, for focus on collaboration and transparency. When we set those expectations in our in-person events, that follows people onto the internet and provides an ameliorating effect for that kind of troll behavior that we so frequently see when people disagree online. So.
Oh yeah, I can see that totally. I've seen comments that people make because you're anonymous, or so you think on the web, and that you would never make in person
ever.
And I totally see that effect. And I know camps specifically have benefited the software, WordPress as a whole, because of the in-person events. Okay, so you brought up something that I wanted to ask you, because I think again, WordPress the community is not immune to conflict, and perhaps there is a lot more conflict. And I shared this online that it's just like most families, we're dysfunctional in ways, and we have our fights and conflicts. But I'd love to hear some thoughts that you have about dealing with conflict. As humans, just in the world together, we're going to have conflict. But I'd love to share that, because I think that's such a immense, it's part of leadership too.
Absolutely. So it really is.
I'd love to hear some thoughts that you have on, dealing and managing conflict.
Oh yeah. So this has been a really rich space for me for growth in this role. I don't like fighting with people. And I don't like, my family history isn't high conflict. And so there was a big learning curve for me with interacting with people online, with grace and dignity. But something recently kind of shifted the way I'm thinking about this. I heard a talk by someone who works on the 10,000 Year Clock project. And this is a project of creating a clock that will last for 10,000 years. And it really shifted gave me some interesting stuff to chew on, as far as what's the time scale that a lot of us are working in when we're doing this work, and he mentioned something about how, to antiquarians or historians, everything is on fire all the time, because everything degrades, right? Metal rusts, entropy is happening all the time. And so the way he described it was, everything is always on fire. And so you can't keep things from being on fire. You can just optimize for the rate of the burn, right? And I frequently think about the discourse in our professional community as sometimes we have fires come up. So that really got my attention when he was like, everything is on fire. I was like, no, I thought I put some stuff out. But that, and a lot of people that I really value in this organization, like we talk about how we run into the fire, like our mediators and our a lot of our leaders in WordPress seek to de-escalate and identify what the problem is that's causing conflict and go into it rather than run away from it. But that idea that just like, what if we don't expect there never to be conflict? What if we just optimize the rate of burn?
Yeah.
It's a fascinating space for me to explore right now. I'm just really thinking, because I've been doing this work for almost 9 years.
Yeah.
There's never been a time that someone wasn't upset about something.
Exactly.
And not because everyone's a jerk. Everyone is not a jerk. Like no. Everyone we have big fights, and it's not because we want to hurt each other. Mm-hmm. It's because people deeply, deeply believe that they're right, or that they're protecting someone that needs protection, or that the thing that they want to have happen will benefit a large number of people in a way that's important to them. So like the motivations are almost never malicious.
Right.
A lot of it comes down to like, did it get personal? Did we identify the person as the problem instead of the behavior or the issue, right? And that will escalate a conflict into a place that can make it difficult to come down to that optimal rate of burn, right? Or there are a few other kind of escalating factors that can get up there, but and so I've been doing some reading about conflict resolution and mediation lately, and I think that rate of burn that open source wants to land in is like, we disagree on the issue, but we agree in each other's value in the organization, right? And when I say the organization, that's pretty loose when it comes to open source, right? Because people can just, there are no walls in this community. Anyone can come in and drop their opinion on you with no context or history or shared value establishment or anything, right? So you're literally working in the open, out in the open, right? But that's still an organization, even if it's not very organized. And so like, if we can just identify like, hey, we all have value in this organism, the WordPress organism, and we're always going to disagree, but not about everything.
Right.
Then that can kind of bring that level of burn down to a place that we can still work together, right? And then the other thing that can kind of kick us up into an unacceptable rate of burn is like misunderstanding, or a place where, again, it gets personal. Like we identify like, you as a person are a bad person, and something like that, right? Or somebody thinking that, right? That misunderstanding about either of facts or what the other person is trying to accomplish, or what the other person thinks of you, can lead to some pretty painful conversations and emotions in our community.
I've seen by and large too, is when you really push down to it, no matter if I agreed with the point or the perspective or not, is by and large what I've seen in this particular community is it comes down to people that just care. Like you said, they happen to care about something. We were just kind of discussing how we got reconnected again was, I pinged you on something just to say you're doing an awesome work and everything. And it was this issue. And when you push down to it, it's people that just care. Like, I think you hit it on the head, which is care about something going on. But it's a unique perspective too, because putting on that empathy, hat and saying, this person is mad, as long as we don't take it personal or be inflammatory about things and talk about issues and not character and things like that, if we can look through each other's eyes and see perspectives that we probably all somewhere in there want similar things.
Yeah. And that's my process. Like before I respond to a criticism on the internet, I find my love for that person.
Hmm.
I hold on to it when I'm even, no matter what they're saying about my program or a decision I've made or a decision somebody else has made that I agree with or whatever. Like I can't let myself respond until I find our common ground, even if it's just on my part of saying, okay, this person is very angry or very disappointed because of a thing that I empathize with, like this, because we have a misunderstanding and they think that something bad is happening. I also don't want that bad thing to happen. But I find my love for them and then I work out of my love for them.
That's so good. Finding that common ground, finding that care, humanity, whatever that is, before you respond. That's a good word for like any relationship, I
It's so
think,
hard.
which is
It's so
and I know some of the people that might be throwing barbs, and I go, "Whew, you're a special person, Andrea," because you can find that.
but it's true. Like I really, like I used to think, like back in the early days, I was like, well, this person wants to hurt people. And I continue to meet people and none of them have ever wanted to hurt someone.
Yeah.
Never. I have never met anyone in this organization who I won't say, I will take that back. I deal with a fair number of code of conduct reports. And so very occasionally I will meet someone who is intending to hurt someone. And in those cases, we do have to set a limit because
Yep.
to create our inclusive safe space, we have to make it very clear, like you can't hurt people here. So that's a
Which
thing.
is back to your, the fostering psychological safety and physical
Mm-hmm.
safety, by the way,
Yeah.
within these events, that you have to have boundaries. And I think that is something I have seen, the code of conduct in particular
Mm-hmm.
for these, that has been more and more visible and vocal, which is a good thing, of saying, no, this will be a safe space for
Mm-hmm.
people so that people can come
Yeah.
and, be inspired and get help and support and things like that for
Yeah.
what they're working on.
Absolutely.
Okay, so practically speaking, the last couple of minutes we have, um, I'm curious. You've seen and helped run some of the biggest, and then events that I've ever been a part of, and then across all this wide space of helping organizers run their events in all types of locations, cultures, and setups. I'm curious some practical takeaways you might have for running a good conference in general.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
And I told
So
you, I heard from one of the organizers, the best practice was make sure you have coffee and good Wi-Fi. And I thought that is so awesome.
for our community, that those two things are super important. I tend to quibble about the Wi-Fi. I think that you can have a great event with no Wi-Fi as long as you
yeah,
tell everyone that there's not going to be Wi-Fi. People
truly.
can't be surprised by
Yeah.
that. Yeah, I mean, so our organizers are tasked with the job to create an event that will connect WordPress enthusiasts, inspire people to do more with WordPress, and then contribute to the open source project. And there are myriad ways to accomplish that goal. But in general, what I like to see in an organizer or an organizing team is starting with empathy,
Hmm.
and starting with empathy for a person that you are not. So
Yep.
taking a look at like as many use cases as you can imagine for your attendees and planning for that experience and really kind of taking yourself back to your beginner's mind or your stranger's mind and thinking through, like, if I am going to an event where I know nobody and I don't know much about this tool, what will make me put me into the frame of mind where I can take advantage of connecting with people and where I can get inspired.
Hmm.
Because what we know about brain chemistry is people don't get inspired or aren't willing to make connections unless they feel safe and welcome.
Yeah.
And so that, like, providing people the experience where they can feel safe and welcome is that's just like, it's table stakes, but it's really hard to do. So like I encourage people to think about lots of different kind of backgrounds, think about what they would like if they're going into a different space. I really encourage organizers and leaders in our community to go to events that are not in our ecosystem, to get both to have that kind of empathetic experience of like, I'm a stranger, help, what do I need to do here? And have that experience, but also to steal ideas because we're open source and we look around, we're like, oh, I'm working that. And then also know your own power, like realize that like you are, as an organizer of an event, you are the host, and you are creating a space that you are inviting other people into. So act like the host, take responsibility for people's experience, plan out how you want them to feel and interact. I mean, part of the coffee thing or caffeinated beverage that is appropriate in your culture is like, there's a huge amount of cognitive load when you are sitting in a place surrounded by strangers and getting new information. And so having something that people can, or some kind of frequently warm beverage that has a little bit of wake up power, but also like not just coffee for people who can't drink caffeine, right? So like something that might be warming for a cold conference room or a cold conference venue. Something that you can use to, so you know what to do with your hands if you feel awkward and you don't know where to be. A place where you can go. Like the coffee thing is functional on multiple levels. You run into people at the coffee station and you have a common experience because you're both trying to doctor your beverage. So now you have a thing that can start a conversation and make that connection. Like there are lots of benefits to that warm beverage station, certainly. And then you can just extrapolate that out to the entire conference experience, realizing the importance of food, and that eating together creates a family, creates a community, and what it does to someone if they come to the table, if you will, and there isn't anything they can eat. Like how welcome do you feel now, friend? Not very. So like making sure that the food situation is inviting and welcoming and inclusive. Realizing the importance of having food, like all of those things are really valuable to achieve that goal. I rambled. Did I answer your question?
Oh, that's awesome. I love the heart of it. I've long thought, and this is why I think we're kindred spirits, is you're driven by values. And we've had these discussions over and over the years. But I know at the heart is that you have these strong values centered on people. And it comes through when you talk about empathy and a host is creating this space, like you said, and inviting people into it and connection and stuff. And I think that's one of the reasons why WordCamps have been very successful and grown as much as they have. Okay. One last thing, and then we'll let you get on with your day, and I appreciate your time. Proudest moment, part of the job that you do.
I'm terrible at this question. Because I am relentless about always pushing myself to the next thing. And one of my biggest weaknesses in my career is that I don't stop to celebrate my wins. But I gotta say, one of my proudest moments recently was creating and delivering a workshop that I gave to the people in my company who focus on the open source project that I'm really excited about bringing out to the broader community about conflict resolution online and in text, and just realizing that all of these sometimes painful learning experiences that I've had, helping our community members find ways that they are more alike than they are different, has resulted in some content and some training material that I'm really excited to kind of bring out into the world. I mean, my proudest moment, it's kind of like asking someone about their favorite book or a wine person about their favorite wine. I have
There
so
you go.
many, but
Yes.
certainly I take pride every single day in the way that the leadership training and the empowerment that the WordPress project and the WordPress community team engages in every day makes me really, really excited and proud, especially when I think about how that will then spread out through the world.
Yep.
That's what makes me excited to get to work in the morning. And
Well, it shows.
thank you.
Okay. Well, Andrea, thanks so much. Where can people find you online?
I am on Twitter sometimes at AND Middleton, ANDMIDDLETON, and certainly in WordPress.org Slack, and also on our team blog, make.wordpress.org/community. And happy to let anyone know how they can become more involved in our programs.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Andrea. I appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me. It was so fun.